Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate. Today I'm interviewing
Keli Stewart.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Molly. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to have you on today. So can you tell me about what you just wrote?
So I wrote a book, a poetry collection called Small Altars, due out on August 24th from Bronzeville Books. Small Altars is my debut poetry collection, which is funny to think I am over 40, but thankful nonetheless to get these words out into the world and share.
And I know I just said this to you, but it really is so incredible. You would not believe it's a debut collection, you know? So I kind of have a question about the name, though, Small Altars. How did you decide on sort of highlighting that poem from the book specifically?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I think I probably need to talk about even the name before I share about the actual poem. I was at a full moon gathering, and one of the many books that they had was a book about altar making. And I flipped through it, and they talked about how you can make these like miniature altars with like cigarette boxes and so on and so forth. And I thought, my God, I've been doing that since I was a kid. My grandfather used to smoke cigars, and I used to take his boxes and keep all of my special things in there, all the rocks that I found that I thought were diamonds, and the like perfume samples and notes and so on and so forth, right? And so Small Altars as a poem really came about as being a bit of the glue of the book. Prior to the poem, I didn't see how much the stories of myself and my mother and my grandmother were intertwined. But Small Altars was definitely it was a poem written after my grandmother passed away, kind of a search for the maternal. Right. And so on and so forth.
That's really interesting, because I remember reading it and going I was wondering why it was specifically that one out of book, because really all these poems they all shine through. But that's a really interesting thing. So I want to talk a little bit about the autobiographical in this, and how you got to the place where, because you talk about a lot of heavy subjects, and like you said, you're talking about your whole family and stuff. How'd you get to the place that you knew you wanted to write that?
Well, I'll tell you this, Molly, and you probably will just watch. So I am a stutterer, and I've always stuttered. When I was a child, I was less fluent than I am right now, but I still stutter. And it's almost like I was forced to be quiet and to listen to people, how they spoke, to listen to story, to listen to these very nuanced bits of language and storytelling and memory. And so I've been writing since I was a kid, and seriously writing since I was a kid. So this book is a long time coming for sure.
Are there any of the poems in here that you wrote a while ago, when you were a kid or anything like that?
Oh, no, I don't have. Although these are poems that really span my motherhood, and my oldest is 21. So it does span a number of years. There aren't any from my childhood, although I do bring in some of the memories of childhood around like jump rope and, play, and so on and so forth. But there are many other elements there as well. In particular, the body. I think that a theme that runs the course of the book is the body. And in a sense, I feel like these are body poems.
I know what you mean, but like, yeah, it very much is like, it feels very, I don't know how to describe it, but like very connected to every like part of like the body and every part of the mind, like everything around you, like just reading it, like, and the way that it's all of the poems are collected together. It feels like you're getting like a full picture, but like a little bit at a time.
Oh, wow. I just like that you said that, because that really kind of plays into the title, Small Altars, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a 130-year-old Queen Anne home that I've been renovating for the past 7 years. And when people come over, one of the first things that they notice is the way that I have items gathered. And so that whole concept of small altars, I see how it shows up in the day-to-day life, as a space of reverence, as a space of ritual, as a space of story.
Yes, definitely. So I want to talk a little bit more about like the process of writing some of these poems. How did you do that? Because like on the podcast a lot, I talk with a lot of novelists and like people that write long form usually. And most of the time it's like, oh, you sit down and you start writing, like you get an idea and just like, or you plot it out or something. But poetry, like how do you do that? How is it different?
Well, it's so funny you should say that, because I got my bachelor's in fiction writing.
Oh,
But I've always been a poet. After finding fiction, I thought, my God, because of motherhood, I didn't have as many, and I had my oldest son when I was in college, when I was in school writing. I didn't have as much time to really sit down and to take in the world in such a way. And I thought, well, let me do the best that I can with my time. I was 20 when my son was born.
mm,
And so what started to come out was poetry.
that's really
Yeah,
cool.
poetry. And it would be like, I'm a person that wakes up very early. So what I found out is if I can get up pre-sunrise at like 4, I can really get a few hours time into myself. And so Small Altars was definitely written in those times. Those times I would be dropping the kids off, and I on my um, on my letter to Hedgebrook, I wrote that I was a steering wheel writer, because I would be writing in the middle of these small snatches of time. And the book, actually, there was another version of it that almost came out into the world about 10 years ago. I had a contract with a small press that didn't manifest. And so I got my heart broken a few more times, and, just decided to kind of sit on the like manuscript, but still writing and just adding things to it. So some of the later work, to me, it speaks to just a large, I think, period of time.
That is really cool. And it does feel so expansive. That's the word I was looking for earlier. But it feels so expansive. I got it. But like how it really goes across like all of this time and all of this space and like all these different aspects of like living and growing up and all of that.
For sure.
So did you have a favorite poem in the book? I know this is an impossible question, but
I think that my favorite poem probably is Afterbirth. Mm-hmm. And it was actually, chosen by the then Illinois poet laureate Kevin Stein. And I thought, my God, this poem was called Afterbirth because it was about the story of my placenta and the story of love. I was in grad school, and my then professor at Chicago State University, Quraish Ali Lansana, he gave us the prompt to write about love, to write a love poem. Well, I've never written a love poem, although I've been in love, outside of roses are red, violets are blue. And I thought to myself, my God, let me write one. And I attempted to write one, and I brought it back to him, and he said that this is not a love poem. It was more why we aren't in love poem. And so Afterbirth is a poem that really explores the heart and explores the concept of family and lineage, ancestry, and future, So I would say that probably is my favorite poem. Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, I love that. One was really amazing too.
Oh, thank you, Molly. Which other one did you like? Did you like another?
I loved all of them. I remember reading it going, oh, I love this one and this one and this one specifically, but I remember I loved, like, adored We Accept Link.
Oh, wow.
I love that one.
Wow.
There were so many though. And I believe Afterbirth was one of the ones that as I was reading going, I want to mention this to her. And then I immediately forgot all of the ones that I wanted to mention. But I know what you mean when you were saying, like, I've never written a love poem. Cause like I write like songs and stuff, which is similar to poetry in a way. And I realized I was like, I've never written a love song. Like they're like in different ways, like they're about different things. It's not like a straight up a love song, but it's like more singing about a type of that. So like I get what you mean. It can be hard to write something that is more traditionally considered about love because it's
right,
sort of nebulous,
Right, for sure. I think that lyrics, just like poems, are very much manifestations. And I feel like you can definitely call into the room just the spirit and the invocation of love, even if that's something that you may not have felt as deeply or something that we don't want to access. I feel like there's something, good in exploring love in its many facets. Because when you think about it, everything is about love. All the songs are about love.
Well, like I would consider Small Altars to be, at least from what I read, to be mostly about love, but not necessarily like straight up romantic love. Like you said before, roses are red, violets are blue. Like it's not that, but it's about like other types.
Oh, wow. That's amazing that you said that, because then that calls into the room it expands the concept of, the very, traditional love poem. So that's nice that you saw the love and the care within each offering.
I think you can see it too in certain thing in something like this too that feels so personal when you're reading it. And it's like you can see it, the love that went into it too. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm only seeing the love that you're writing about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Brooks said that poetry is life distilled. And I
Mhm.
think if you can go into those very particular moments, whether it's, teaching your child to hop a fence and understanding what that means, or, just like in meditation for poor mothers, taking time out to care for yourself in the day to day, and I think right now the world is so crazy, and so full. I think that we are finding out that, all we really have is the love and care that we have to extend to one another right now. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I kind of like switching up what you're saying a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about the editing process for this and like how did you decide what to cut, like what to change, especially when it's something so personal?
You know, when I gave the manuscript to my press, they actually did not, you know, um, did not, take a poem out of the manuscript. They accepted all of the poems, which was amazing. And I had an opportunity to work closely with a few writers to help me um, order some of the poems, because I think that's the hardest thing, to decide the way in which you want to tell the story.
Mhm.
And this story was not a linear story to tell. It to me felt more of a thematic story. So yeah, so you see some of the sections, um, especially the last section, how to catch a body. Um, you see in there, I think, some of the earlier themes at the start of the book.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love that it was how it was like organized by like how it has sections where it's like this is about, and it's got a title and you like the title like highlights one of the poems, which kind of is that. I want to talk a little bit more about that actually too, like finding the poems that you wanted to use to kind of encapsulate that entire section.
I think that I think that as a total manuscript, just the expanse of time that is captured in this book, it was almost necessary to break it up into sections, you know. Even as I looked over all of the poems stacked on top of each other, there was this notion of, like, let us stop to catch a breath. Also, this last poem um, maybe may speak to a theme that shows up in the next section. And there's this whole section of poems that mention sheets that I didn't know I have this kind of motif going that I return to, but I think it's 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 something that's kind of woven throughout the book, um, at different times, to speak about the notion of domesticity and like meekness and, following the rules and, plain things, as opposed to more of the wild woman um, kind of trope that I see following some of the poems.
Yeah. And I love that you didn't notice like that there was the entire like theme of sheets and that kind of stuff. I love those moments in writing and in reading, like, oh, there's a theme I didn't even know was in there.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, you know how every writer has their thing that they like, okay, so then that's my thing. Because it's like maybe 5 or 6 poems with sheets in some iteration, white sheets in particular, hanging them or swaddled in them or so on and so forth. So
Yeah. I think that's just really cool. What poem was the hardest to write for you in this book?
That's a really good question. And I'm kind of going over everything in my mind and like looking at this, and probably the one that, okay, so I knew when I wrote Pink Things that I wanted to talk about porn in some way, as as a young person who was exposed to, porn pretty early in my life. I wanted to write something that, something that is so like innocent, like Pink Things is about that very girl moment when, the speaker of the poem ventures downstairs and is exposed to, these images. And we wonder how, girls are shaped, are formed by these images and by, the way that sexuality and things like that are more accessible than they were a long time ago.
And I love in that poem the point too where she's like, oh, if anybody like sees me down here or anything, I'll just grab something pink.
Right.
Like I'll just grab a pink thing and then they'll like leave me be. And like that, trying to like conform into that what should be with the just playing with something pink over there.
Sure. Right. And it starts with those pink things and the poem ends with those pink things as well. That definitely speak in opposition to some of the more graphic images within the poem.
Yeah. I that was a really interesting one to read. Like as I was like, because at first I was like, oh, like what is this? Why is she talking about porn? What is going on? And then as I was reading it, I was like, no. This is really interesting. Like it kind of taught me not to judge it because I tend to judge stuff as I read.
Right.
And when I was like reading more into that story, it like kind of removed that sort of bias for me.
Right. And some things we cannot look away from, and some things, like we see how the culture that we're in shapes our identity, how we walk in the world, how we see the world, and so on and so forth. So, Pink Things was definitely hard to write. And I needed to get a little bit of distance from it in order to tell the story in the way that it was told. And so it's also hard to read. It's one of those poems where the audience is like, okay,
Yeah.
Right, because it's taking you into a child's view of watching sex, and being unsure about what these images mean.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's like what I said too. Like at first I was like, oh no. And then I like, once you really read it, I think I actually had to, there were a couple parts in it too that I'd like stop and kind of like go back over it and like kind of like take it all in, you know? And that, I think that was definitely one of the ones that I wanted to say before to you. It was one that was like, wow, it was very impactful and like really well done and very interesting.
Oh, thank you, Molly.
Yeah. You know, I think that's about all I had for you today, but thank you so much for coming on. This was really great.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved talking to you, and please share anything that you can about this book.
Yeah, definitely. I will be promoting it on everything. Everyone, please go and read this one. It's a really exceptional read. I just have one last question, and that is, what do you have coming up?
So in my life, I am the founder of an arts organization on the west side of Chicago called Front Porch Art Center. And where I live, there aren't a lot of spaces for art. And so I think people hear a lot about Chicago, and they also need to understand that, you know, we need spaces that are creative and that are an extension of culture and story and narrative. So I'll be working hard on that. We're on Instagram and Facebook. And I am starting a artist residency with the Art Institute of Chicago at Holman Square. So we'll be doing a bit of community storytelling and performance, archiving, and writing.
That is awesome. I'm going to check that out and like try and see if I can see anything related to that. If you ever have like any shows or anything with that, because I'm in Chicago.
No, are you in Chicago?
I am. When you said it, I was like, oh, you're there too?
We need to connect. I would love to meet you in person.
I would love to meet you too. All right.
Okay.
We will. We'll try and find something that we can do. Maybe if COVID allows, if we can do some like, because our network, we'll cut this part out, but our network does like marathons and stuff. Not in quarantine, but in usual times it does like marathons and like like shows and stuff. So if we do one of those, I will contact you if you want to come and hang out.
And my book releases at Heaven Gallery in Wicker Park on the 28th.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. I will see if I can make it because that sounds really cool.
Thank you.
I'm out in the northwest suburbs, but I come into the city a lot. So, but yeah, well, just thank you so much again for coming on. This was awesome to talk to you.
Thank you. I had a blast.
All right. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Keli Stewart.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after. The end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.